You're listening to WMPG 90.9 Gorham, Portland, Southern Maine Community Radio from USM. Live from the Orion Cygnus arm of the Milky Way galaxy, this is Scientifically Speaking, a weekly half-hour program devoted to elegant curiosities, and I am one of your hosts, Sarah Chang, and joining me, as always, is Bernie Rhyme, DJ Star Watcher. How are you, Bernie?
Yes, hi, Sarah. Very good. Thank you.
Reach out to us at WMPG Scientifically Speaking at gmail.com or on Twitter at WMPG SciSpeak, and you can head over to WMPG.org to find the last 5 weeks of archives of all of your favorite shows, including this one. Bernie, could you let our listeners know what is up in the night sky for this coming week?
Okay, yes, certainly. So this will be Friday, January 14th, second Friday already of the new year. So basically we're going to have a waxing gibbous moon. So it's going to be getting bigger. It's not going to set till like 4:30 in the morning. It was actually the first quarter moon on the 9th, and it'll be full on the 17th, so just about halfway in between that. Now we lost the planet Venus. That's going to show up again in the morning sky. But Mercury was really close to Saturn a couple days ago, so they should still be visible. And then Jupiter's the last one to set, so that one's still up there. It's too bad it was cloudy when all 4 of those planets were all together, along with a nice meteor shower. Those were all clouded out because we're recording this ahead of time, obviously. So Mars is still a morning planet. Venus won't show up again in the morning until closer to the end of January. However, we can give you a short update on the James Webb. So this is like 12 days before it's actually going to be aired. So I'm sure by then things will be further along. But even as of January 2nd, the telescope is 57% of the way towards going to the L2 point, about 1 million miles away. But it's slowing down. It got halfway, fairly quickly in just like a week or two. And now it's slowing down. It's going about 0.3 miles per second, where it was going about 1 mile per second after it started doing all the things. So everything's going fine as of now. It's starting to deploy the big sun shield. It hasn't put the actual telescope part
What would
together.
cause it to slow down?
It's not supposed to. It's going to take 30 days to get there. And in the first week, if it went almost halfway, it was supposed to slow down. Because I think they have to do all those other deployments.
Okay.
And then we'll probably use a lot of energy, and there's no rush to get there. It's going to be there for 10 years, hopefully.
Okay.
So, hopefully.
No rush. James
No
Webb,
rush.
just slow down there.
Yeah, just fly out there in 6 days, and then it's probably safer to set everything up as you get out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know the engineering and the technical reasons, but it's slowing down and everything's going fine as of about 10 days ago. So hopefully it'll be that much further along and that much closer when this airs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're excited for that and looking forward to. When is it supposed to be at L2?
It'll take a month from Christmas Day.
Gotcha.
So the 25th of January. So just a couple more
Getting
months.
close.
Yep.
Sweet. Thanks, Bernie.
Sure, you're welcome.
And if you couldn't take notes fast enough, you can also check out the monthly What's Up column in the Portland Press Herald. Today's show is all about the brain. Well, kind of. It's about a couple of folks who are kind of people who do really good work to help teach us and do research about the brain and neuroscience specifically. And I think the first person that we want to highlight is Dr. Heather Berlin. And she is currently Associate Clinical Professor of Psychiatry and Neuroscience at Mount Sinai School of Medicine. And she researches to achieve a better understanding of the neural bases of impulsivity, compulsivity, and the emotion associated with the goal of developing more targeted treatment. So she is actively doing really good work in understanding why we and how we kind of suppress things in our brain, things like that. And she did her postdoc fellowship at Mount Sinai School of Medicine and her PhD at the University of Oxford, Magdalen College, and her master's in public health at Harvard University. So I wish I could say, and welcome to the show, but
nice
actually she's
Yeah.
we don't have her here, unfortunately, but we think she's a very, very cool scientist and wanted to highlight her work as well as the work that she's done with her husband, Baba Brinkman. And this is all thanks to you, Bernie, for introducing them to me and now to our listeners. So
Yep.
why don't you give our listeners a little bit of like how you know about her,
Okay.
what's so special about her?
Yeah. So I have several people that we've done. I first saw her on Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's a great program. I usually try to watch the video part of it. It's nicer to see him there. And they always have some specialty guest. In that case, it was her. That's how I found out about Hakeem Olasei. That's
Mhm.
how I found out about Kate the Chemist. We just did a show on her. So yeah, so I mean that'd be a great source. I mean that's a whole hour. We have a shorter program, and we don't have a comedian or a lot of these people aren't live, but we can certainly talk about them and learn
Are you
stuff
saying
from them.
that we're not funny?
We're not funny enough. Well, Chuck's a professional. He actually is pretty funny because he thinks on the spot, and you can see that's not really
Mhm.
rehearsed, and he'll throw some really interesting connection, and it's really funny for them, and I'm sure for the million people plus that listen to his his Star Talk every day. So that's how I found out about her, and then I found out that Baba Brinkman, the Canadian rapper, was her husband when I watched one of the international science festivals that Brian Greene sponsored, and she was on that along with Neil deGrasse and some other famous people, and he came up for the musical interlude and this really clever rap, and so that was her husband. So that's how I kind of got introduced to them.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, she actually does really cool work and I think she's very passionate about STEM and science communication. And with kind of working with Baba Brinkman, we see that being harnessed in a really unique way. I think she and him have both teamed up to do kind of comedy shows in some ways. I know they're not quite comedy shows in the same vein that we probably think of when we think of comedy shows, but they're entertaining and they're very informative and they're kind of a mix between live live experimentation, if you will, with Baba Brinkman, because him being he's a rapper, and I think of that aspect of the creativity and the cognitive requirements that allow him to freestyle so well are really interesting to her. And so she's done this whole thing on like the neuroscience of creativity, which we'll go into a little bit later. But um, let's dive into some of her work. Like she's kind of done some work to communicate like who is your brain, what exactly is your brain, right, Bernie?
Hmm.
And then some like a little bit on how we can understand what free will is, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I found that part really interesting. That didn't come in that TED talk, but she made other mentions about it in some of the science festival talks and some of those things. Yeah, so the brain, I mean, obviously she talks about all the different parts of it. I know some of the technical stuff, but she talked specifically about the multiple personality disorders and, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
finding better ways to treat these by knowing, putting people in the MRI machines and seeing what lights up and having her own ideas and her own lab there. I mean, people
Mm-hmm.
go in there and she tests people for all kinds of other things that can really help them. So basically, I mean, she did find, how plastic, how malleable the brain is, that you can change it. I mean, we know we can grow new neurons and all these type of things. So actually, the way she kind of ended that talk would be that you can actually change your thoughts, and then it would change your behaviors in your brain. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like reversing. They used to think that everything just from the brain, even though she can find places that relate. She sees that the thought is first, which is an interesting way. And then she ends that talk by happy sculpting. So you're actually sculpting that brain by changing your thoughts and behavior, and then you change your brain and who you are, because we don't really know who we are per se, just what we can study, but we're much more than just the brain. So she's getting into some of those things from the scientific aspect is really kind of interesting and unique.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that begs the question of, is your personality
Hmm.
um like does it come from your genes or does it come from your environment? And I
Hmm.
think the agreement is generally, obviously your genes play some part of it, but ultimately, like you were saying, your brain is shaped by your environment, the things that you've experienced growing up and even now.
Yeah.
Your personality, I think your personality generally is set, right? That's what we've kind of talked about by the time you reach a certain age.
Hmm.
But you can change,
Yep.
you know,
You can
you can
change. You
still
can always learn new
change over
things
time.
and stuff
Yeah.
at any age too.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. She uses like these electrodes for deep brain stimulation.
Hmm.
to to help people with certain issues.
Mhm.
And so she showed a couple things on some of the clients she was working with. That so it's nothing really like we had mentioned the Neuralink and Elon Musk. I was thinking
Mhm.
about that. So it's nothing like that. But it can really work when they're on. I mean, they're not. She can remove them and it's
Mhm.
reversible, and she's only doing it to help the person, and then they might go back to what they were without that. But she's thinking that this is only the very beginning of what we can do. She likens it to like the Model T Ford, based on what we're going to be able to do with electrode maybe just 5 or 6 years from now. And as we learn more about, it's very targeted and specific. As you
Right.
said, she works a lot with impulse control and emotions and things like that because a lot of people now, with the drug overdoses and all that, have a lot of those issues, and they can all be corrected in some method like that.
Yeah, yeah. She did make a funny
Yeah,
joke where it's like be nice to your neurosurgeon because they have their fingers on the button that
yeah,
controls the impulses to your brain that
yeah,
allow you to feel calm when
yeah.
you haven't been.
But she's not going to turn people into monsters. I don't Frankenstein. I don't think the things are designed to set up to do that. But
Yeah.
she could probably cause you some trouble if she wanted to with those electrodes.
I
So,
think those are generally fairly safe though and
mhm,
very widely used. So, if I'm sure people have heard of them, but if you are suffering from anything, definitely speak to your neurologist.
yeah, yeah. So I like too how she said that the brain is actually very delicate in a way because it can be,
Mhm.
but it's also very robust and it can heal.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's an interesting, combination of things and how it interacts, as you said, environment and genetic is certainly part of it. Like for instance, when she gets into this whole thing about genius, which actually isn't covered in this particular TED talk, but there's other aspects of it. It has a genetic component, but then you have to put like the work in. Like
Mhm.
if you have like being a concert pianist or something like that, you still have to put, these people practice 6, 7 hours a
Mhm.
day, or a good athlete or something, or some other musician. It doesn't have to be piano, it can be guitar or whatever. You still have to put all that in. Where other people, maybe they could put thousands of hours in and they'll never get anywhere. But if you have genetics and the work, because they wouldn't want to do that, so they wouldn't be doing all that work if they didn't want to do it. And then you can really become these, which is like a genius. But everyone potentially is a genius, and she was talking about that too, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so another thing Dr. Heather Berlin brought up was a fact about free will. I think I first saw this on the Star Talk episode. So basically, based on the way, and I've seen this in other programs too, she thinks we don't really have free will because the brain will get an impulse and it takes like 1/100 of a second for your hand to do something, to pick something. I mean, she has all these tests designed, like you pick a color or whatever simple thing it is. So you could interpret that the brain is already doing that and then it's making your hand do it and so on. But then, of course, it's the point of, what is the brain and what is the hand and who's really doing this. So another interesting thing actually is that when you remember something, you're recreating that memory from someplace in the brain, but always in the present moment. So then people that have some injuries in the brain always think it's the present moment. Like if you have Alzheimer's or you see your wife for the first time, she has a lot of patients like that. It's always, first time they've ever seen this person or something. So in a sense, of course, you do have memory, but you're recreating it, and that's one reason why you could have memories that are false, or they could be implanted.
Mm.
If you were a kid, or if you're more impressionable, or if you saw a crime scene and you saw it all wrong. And they've done this test in animals too, and in humans, that you can actually your memory gets recreated at that moment all the time. So
Huh.
that can really give you some deep insight into what memory is and how that works. The revision is history, all these things. You're always
Mm.
creating them in the moment. So now, as part free will, though, and against determinism, I have a book here by John Wheeler called At Home in the Universe. And he has a really interesting take on this, actually coming from Niels Bohr, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, who had big discussions with Einstein about the nature of relativity and quantum mechanics. So Bohr is actually saying that it's deterministic in a way, maybe more like just the brain part, but you also have free will. You also have choice, which is what Dr. Berlin would say, like you're actually sculpting your brain in some sense. So
Mhm.
you do have the choice. Everything's kind of there. You're not just determined. So it's kind of both, which is a really nice way because I know there's people on one side or the other, and you can say, quantum mechanics and uncertainty principle means everything's determined or everything's open. But I relate that to the religions and science debate of Einstein. He says religion without science is blind, and science without religion is what was that one? Is lame. Oh yeah, lame. Right. So lame and blind. So Yeah. So you kind of need both, and it's kind of neat that it's open that you can have both of those, free will and determinism, both play a role. So you have some say in what happens.
Um, yeah, no, I hear that.
Mhm.
So Baba Brinkman is her husband, and I don't actually know how long they've been married for, but they do have two children.
Yeah.
And he is a science rapper based in New York and is known for his rap guides to consciousness, to evolution, to medicine, to climate change, etc. And he's actually originally Canadian and describes himself as kind of being a Canadian hip hop artist with a kind of more science focused bent. But nothing but sexy beats and sumptuous brain food. I like to think that that's kind of what we're striving for too, as well. Except we don't really have the beats here.
Yeah. Well, we'll
And
be
it's
on. He could play for us.
yeah. And essentially, what his goal is for his work is that it's essentially science communication meets hip hop, and he's really interesting. He started off with, I think he was in the middle of an English degree, and started off with basically started off this career by re-envisioning the Canterbury Tales into modern rap songs, and the rap of the rap of the Canterbury Tales actually premiered at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in 2004. And because he was this Canadian scholar of medieval literature, he performed it across England and then brought it to the US off Broadway. And he was actually kind of, I think some people have noted him as the pioneer of lit hop, which is essentially literary hip hop.
Live
um,
up. That's right.
yeah. And
Hmm.
not just for the Canterbury Tales, but
Yeah.
also for rap adaptations of epics such as Beowulf, Gilgamesh, etc.
Hmm.
And you can actually find those as I think he released an album called The Canterbury Tales Remixed. And so we want to actually share a couple of them so they're licensed under Creative Commons so we can share them. And just so that you as a listener get a sense of what we're even talking about. And so I think, Bernie, have you heard the DNA one? The evolution,
No, I didn't hear that one yet.
okay. So I believe this one is essentially the rap guide to evolution. And we're just going to play a small clip of this here.
We are made of DNA. We are made of DNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid is what we are made of. We are made of DNA. We are made of DNA. Strands of double helix are where all these bodies came from.
The story of life on this crazy planet. The protagonist isn't mad. No, it's a microscopic information package called deoxyribonucleic acid. The DNA strand has the same basic plan, and every living thing, every plant, every animal, every little flea has the same proteins with a certain percentage of the same genes arranged identically. It's no coincidence. It means every living thing has a shared ancestor with every living thing. This is true for Jews and Christians and Sufi mystics and Buddhists and every religion and superstition. If you can listen to this, it means you're passing through this existence on a wave of DNA, and you're just one of its newest inventions.
So that was just a little piece of his rap guide to evolution.
Hmm. Yeah,
What do you
so
think?
clever. Yeah. Well, I know he does great writing and then putting together. I mean, I know that people can't see the visual part, but that was interesting too.
So I like that one because he does well. One, he was able to rhyme deoxyribonucleic acid. I can't remember what the line was before, but thought that one was really fun.
Hmm.
And let's find there was another one that was also very good. And this one is called. We actually recently did a show on the 2021 report, and this is called IPCC.
You want a new definition of hardcore? Check out the Intergovernmental Climate Report. It says the world is getting warmer unequivocally, and the oceans have increased 30% in acidity, and 90% of the warming trend is oceanic and concentrated in the Arctic. Nobody panic, but the level of greenhouse gases in the air is higher now than it's been in millions of years. We added more than 1 trillion tons of CO2 to the atmosphere. It's gonna be centuries before some of the gas is clear. I'm dropping science, unvarnished, unbiased, but I don't blame you if your instinct is to deny it, cause we evolved to prioritize immediate threats. If it bleeds, it leads, that's what the media says. So let the gangster-esque rap music paint a picture, and I'll hit you with some evidence-based predictions. Get ready for wars, famines, droughts, floods, hurricanes, heat waves, murders, thugs, chaos, refugees, stress, disease, extinction, disaster, IPCC, wars, famines.
So that was another little clip of his IPCC one.
Yep. He paints a pretty bleak picture, but I think it's good to, put it out that way so people can do something, or at least believe the science.
No,
Yeah.
it was. I thought that was really. He really boiled it down really well because one, he takes some of the solid numbers from the report, and he reports them as is. And I really liked how he covered the part about bias, and how he said, "Oh, you're probably not gonna believe me," things like that, and he addresses why as well, because we respond to immediate threats, I think was his line. That's their immediate reaction, is to deny the whatever doesn't fit their
Yep.
kind of ideal, if that makes
The
sense.
worldview or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. So Baba he started rapping actually in 1998 at the age of 19. And he talks about this particular theorem quite a bit. So as I mentioned, he was in the process of his English degree when he decided, hey, I've got to figure out a way to, he's been rapping for a while, but he wanted to kind of, I think, pursue this as a career. And he does pay a lot of homage to kind of the people who really have built up rap and who are the faces of hip hop. And he acknowledges his kind of position as being this white guy and doing rap in this day and age. And he does talk about how he believes he started rapping before Eminem, but then Eminem got big. And so one of the things he references quite a bit is Bayes' theorem of probability, and that's essentially this law. Actually, I think it is also considered a law, but it's this probability of him being able to succeed in the rap world. And he's basically talking about competition, and he, as a minority in this case, he's acknowledging that he has to work really hard in order to get anywhere in this world, to break through it all. And so he believes he has to prove that he matters. And so that's how he found this little niche of being a science communicator and focusing his rap work on science communication. And so just a quick aside, the Bayes' theorem is named after Thomas Bayes, and it essentially describes the probability of an event based on prior knowledge of conditions that might be related to the event. So it is just looking at what is the likelihood of him succeeding in the current state. And so he believes he has to prove that he matters, and ultimately I think his goal is that he wants to drive listeners towards greater compassion through his work. And he's got a YouTube page, just search Baba Brinkman, and we'll also kind of share those two music videos that we shared clips from as well. So how did they meet? Do you know this story at all?
No, I didn't find that out yet, no.
So I don't know specifics, but Dr. Berlin did mention that they met on stage somewhere. And one thing I mentioned, kind of bringing both of them together now in this show is that, they are husband and wife, And in 2014, I believe, was when they did one of their first shows together. So Dr. Berlin obviously is very passionate about science communication, and one of their greatest hits was a show called Off the Top, and it was about an hour long, hour and a half long comedy show that premiered at Festival Fringe again in 2014. And so this is 10 years after his work with the Canterbury Tales. And so Dr. Berlin runs this lab in New York and was really interested in his brain while he was freestyle rapping. And during this show, it was really great. She actually had him on stage as kind of this live patient. And so on this stage, she's the whole point of the show is looking at kind of the neuroscience of creativity. And she actually has Baba do a number of experiments on stage. So, for example, she has him freestyle, which is much more difficult than just recalling from memory a rap. And she kind of talks about it as, you know, because you're required to come up with novel association between ideas. It requires some language processing, and it also requires some kind of conscious structuring of that rap so that things make sense and they rhyme, and you know, what he's rapping about is striking the audience in some way. And the experiment that she has him do is while he's freestyling, he has to write a letter. And so she did this actually back to back once, while he was rapping a memorized rap, and he was able to type a letter very coherently. But then while he was freestyling, he could not. And so he failed that test. And because it's just showing that, hey, it requires a lot more space from other areas of the brain.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true in the piano too, because I play that. If it's something you learn like one part, like one hand or something, and you can know that, and you know it if you can do that while you're talking to someone, you know, something original, and you're just playing that automatically because you've learned that you've done it 10 or 12 times or whatever it might take you to do. So it's just a mini version of what you were talking about. So I know
Yeah.
exactly how that works.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
know, that's also a tool that
Hmm.
that some students have been able to use effectively, especially when, you know, they're in class and they're listening and they can't. It's hard for them to just focus on the professor, the teacher, kind of talking, and it helps them to pay attention if they're maybe drawing or just fiddling or something with
Hmm.
their hands, and because it uses a different part of the brain
Hmm.
and allows the brain to occupy itself with something while the other part of the brain that you want to kind of interpret what's coming in the ears, to kind of work better
Hmm.
or work without the distraction, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the last things to kind of end this on is Dr. Berlin's work on the neural basis of the dynamic unconscious. So that was actually the title of one of her more recent papers, I believe. And she's really interested in this work of kind of how do you harness the unconscious mind. And so, for example, the prefrontal cortex she talks about as helps you to avoid things that you don't want to do. Like how can you use that? And so how can you access the unconscious so that you don't have to fight impulses all the time? One way to look at the processes where a person has to spontaneously say things that will allow them to kind of allow those things to flow out of the unconscious mind, if that makes sense. And so she looks at the brain during freestyle rap, and basically what happens is the medial prefrontal cortex activates, and you know, it supports basically the internal generation of new ideas, and the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex turns down, which also filters your behaviors, conform to social norms, and it makes it so that you can kind of lose your sense of self. So these are the two things: one is turning on, one is turning off a little bit more, and that allows kind of the free flow of information and new connections and novel associations to form. So, and she obviously sees this as kind of sometimes the consciousness gets in the way of allowing us to get to that state. And so she sees this with jazz improvisers, with meditation. And, she also has done work with psychedelic kind of drugs as well that also allow you to achieve that state when maybe sometimes you have things getting in the way.
Yeah, she calls it the free flow when the filter is off, to create a free flow, which is true, I know, of any musician or anything you do, even a comedian or whatever you do. It doesn't have to be those type of things. Yeah.
Yeah, so she, great scientist, great partnership there with her and Baba Brinkman. And definitely check them out more. They do some really cool work with science communication, and I think that you can learn a lot from them. You've been listening to Scientifically Speaking here on WMPG with myself and Bernie. Stay tuned for Something for the Weekend with Anella, and from your favorite nerds, just a reminder to vaccinate, to mitigate, and then we can all congregate.